Vanessa LaPointe. I'm a registered psychologist in private practice. I work at the Wishing Star in South Surrey, and my primary role there is to support children and families who are facing all different kinds of issues in terms of life and development. Today, my job is to talk with you about the topic of supporting your child post-injury and focusing on adjustment and adaptation and resilience. And when we walk through that kind of a topic, one of the key phrases that we often land on is that sometimes the things we cannot change are the things in life that are in fact meant to change us. And when we really kind of get down to the core of what adaptation is and the heart of growing up children and ensuring that they're resilient and they have the best possible chance in life, we are really focused on trying to give children the tools to be able to move through some of the things in life that are challenging and present some difficulties. And so when we land on this idea of adjustment and really wanting to support children in terms of adaptation, one of the things that we really want to be able to focus on with families is talking about resilience. And really, in terms of resilience, lots of times people think that that's about children who overcome the greatest odds. But the way that we talk about resilience in the world of mental health and supporting families is that resilience is all about achieving outcomes that are better than expected. And so one of the things that we really want to focus on as far as adjustment is concerned is trying to prime resilience in the developing child, especially a child for whom some kind of curveball has landed in life, and we need to be able to sort of walk them through. The literature, as far as child development is concerned, would tell us that there really are three main factors that come into play in terms of resilience. And the first is that we really do have to consider what are the risk factors. So what are the other things going on for the child that might undermine their ability to reach better than expected outcomes? The second piece that we would look at really is protective factors. What are the things that are happening for the child that would make it work well for them and where they would be able to rise above things and move through things because they have other pieces that are really working in their favor. And one of the biggest components that we can highlight as far as priming adaptation and resilience in the growing child is looking at the idea of relationship as a protective factor. We know that beyond any other protective factor in the world of child development, the one thing that stands the test of time and comes up over and over again in every single study exploring resilience is that if children have a positive and healthy emotional attachment to at least one adult figure in their lives, they tend to have better than expected outcomes. And then finally, when we consider the different factors that affect adaptation and resilience, we look at functioning and the child's capacity to be adaptable. And so I'm going to walk you through this idea of adaptation and really sort of try to embrace what it means to facilitate that in the world of a child. When we look at adaptation, what we're hoping for a child to gain from being primed to really be adaptive is that they're going to be able to wander around an issue and have a look at it from multiple perspectives. Oftentimes, when we're mired in what feels difficult or what feels overwhelming, we sort of lose sight that there might be another path through, there might be another way around. And so our job as big people is to really gift a child the vantage point of being able to see their situation through multiple lenses and from different perspectives. And in doing so, we can really give the child the idea that there's a way to persevere through this, that even though what might have been the most obvious way through maybe isn't working for us, there is a way through and a way around. And when children have an adaptive process that really works for them in that manner, what we find is that they're able to take the energy that they otherwise would have been focusing on being frustrated and undone and angry and unhappy about something in life that hasn't worked out for them and refocus that energy on growing. And that's what we want for kids, especially kids who have faced a brain injury of some kind and are working in terms of adjusting to life after that kind of injury. Now, one of the things that we find in terms of promoting adaptation and resilience for children is that we really have to have children feel vulnerable and have access to the emotions that are going to work in their favor in terms of facilitating and priming the adaptive response. One of the things that we often see happen for children who are really struggling with adaptation and adjustment and being able to find that resilient core within them is that they've become kind of bogged down and buried in their emotions. For any human being in life, when you face a circumstance that you cannot change, a circumstance that has created for you a difficulty that's really challenging to overcome, you will often early on in that circumstance try to sort of rail against it, where you will hope and wish and drive at any possible change or circumstance that could change the situation you find yourself in. And when people are buried in that phase of kind of moving through what it is to adjust, they tend to be very angry. And the challenge with anger is that it can kind of take hold in life and fester in ways that really don't work well for us. And one of the biggest challenges that we see as mental health professionals supporting children and families through different challenges in life is that oftentimes the adults or the big people around the child will fall victim or become sort of part of the angry world of the child who is trying to adjust. And if we get sort of sucked into that vortex of really responding to all of the frustration and many of the challenging behaviors that are going to come out with that kind of frustration, we actually become part of a process that does not promote adaptation, that does not facilitate adjustment, and that does not allow a child to really awaken their inner resilient core. And so what we really want to do is be able to sit with our children as they're angry and frustrated and undone and overwhelmed, and prime in them a sort of softness that comes from feeling understood, that comes from really being able to come to terms with and understand what has happened, that comes from being able to have access to your emotions and to be vulnerable to those emotions. And when children have that kind of world where they can feel safe in letting all of those emotions fly, even the emotions that are unpleasant for those of us around the child, they will come to a place of softening out of that anger. But if we are constantly bogged down in this world of responding to all of the frustration and some of the yucky behaviors that can come with that, we actually become part of holding the child in that spot rather than softening them, having them feel truly understood and cherished, having them really have the sense that we're picking up what it is that they're putting down. If we can do those things for them, we move through. If we can't do those things for them, then the child gets stuck and we all kind of end up feeling stuck. And so one of the biggest pieces as far as priming adaptation and resilience is that we have to stay soft for kids. Kids who are going through big changes in life often are overwhelmed by the feelings and the emotions that they'll have popping up around that. And it is our job to cultivate an environment around the child that has them feeling like they are understood and heard, and that we are so big and so full of life for them and so full of compassion for them that we can handle all of that for them. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we're going to become doormats and take all sorts of abuse and have no boundaries and no expectations around all of that. But it does mean that we're going to be the kind of big people that respond to the big feelings of children with incredible compassion and understanding and nurturing care. We will know that a child has become bogged down in the first stages of adjustment if we are sort of really stuck in that place of a child being highly reactive. And what you'll see for a child who is highly reactive is that they've turned off a lot of their more vulnerable emotions. You won't see a lot of sad coming out of them. You won't see a lot of soft kind of tears coming out of them. You may see tears, but they're often tears of anger and frustration rather than the soft kinds of tears. We know that that child has sort of shut down their emotional responding, and as a result of that, all of this anger kind of builds up inside of them. And you'll see a child who's having meltdowns, you'll see a child who's tantruming, you'll see a child who's very oppositional, you might see a child who's easily dysregulated, where they'll go from 0 to 100 at a moment's notice. You might have a child who has challenges focusing, who generally is unsettled, it might be interrupting sleep, and who overall, if you had to sort of think about what's happening for them, they're either acting out with very big feelings that are getting kind of nasty for the people around them, or they're acting in with very big feelings that get kind of nasty inside of them. And so what we don't want is for a child to land in that place. What we do want is for a child to be surrounded by big people who very much understand what it is that they're going through, and for the child to very much internalize the sense that the big people have got it. Now, aside from big people who may be reacting to children in ways that are not facilitating adjustment ideally, we also have a few other things that can get in the way for children. One of the things that can really sort of hamper this adjustment and adaptation kind of phase is a child who, by nature and just by temperament, is very sensitive. We know that children who temperamentally are intense or sensitive will experience adjustment much more intensely and will be a lot more sensitive to the big feelings that are coming up for them around that kind of an adjustment period. And so for those children, it's not that it's not possible to move through, it's just that because they're exceptional in their sensitivity and intensity, they require an exceptional big person to be supporting them through that period. We also know that sometimes in this especially early adjustment period, we have children and big people who are feeling very alarmed maybe by the situation that has preceded their adjustment period. And as a result of that, sometimes boundaries and expectations and other things that normally would be in place have been allowed to slide a little bit. The child experiences a slide of boundaries or expectations in the same way that an adult would experience coming up upon a large bridge where the guardrails have been removed. It's not that you needed those guardrails to safely cross that bridge, but it's that you needed those guardrails in order to feel safe in crossing that bridge. And in the same way, children need to be able to sense that there are some boundaries and some expectations and some rules that exist in their world, and that gives them this sense of containment and safety that they might otherwise feel conflicted about or struggle with because they would lack the safety that would come with otherwise sort of normal constraints and social boundaries that we as big people put into place for children. Another thing that can happen for a child is that they begin to drown in things that are unchangeable. And this would be especially true for a child who's having to face adjustment post-brain injury. What we don't want for children is that they have to just kind of suck it up and take it on the chin and learn to be big and figure it out. What we do want for children is that they experience us as big people moving in quiet and understanding ways around them in order to soften the impact of some of the things in life that might otherwise overwhelm them. So if you have a child who's facing a significant adjustment in their world, one of the biggest things that you can gift them is to be sure that the rest of the world is quiet for as long as they need in order to be able to sort of summon their reserves and summon their resources and move through that situation. And then finally, if a child has experienced way too much intensity, way too much reactive emotion from big people, or just way too much of life, and they've had to actually shut down their emotional self in order to preserve them, this is a child who also is going to get stuck in the adaptive process. We want for children to be able to feel and to be vulnerable and to have access to their emotions. And for kids who have just had too much of that going on, the brain and the soul know that that's not a good situation for a child to be in. And so what will happen is that the child will numb out to the world around them rather than tune into that world. And if we want kids to be adapting and to be as resilient as possible, we really do need them tuned into that world, and we need them to be able to feel all the big, yucky, uncomfortable feelings that come with being a child who's in a significant period of adaptation. So as we move through all of that and we begin to understand that adaptation is a process that comes with a lot of big emotions and can often be messy and overwhelming, I wanted to provide to you today some examples of different things that you can do to best support your child and find a way through this adjustment period. Now, one of the things that we focus on very resolutely when arming big people with all of the tools that they need to make the best of a situation for their child is to really focus on the idea that your relationship you have with your child is at the core of everything. We don't need to know a single other thing about you or your child in terms of how adjustment and response to whatever change life has exacted upon you is going. If we know that you have relationship working for you, and we go back to that
that resilience literature that told us relationship is the most foundational thing in terms of what improves outcomes for children. If you have that relationship working for you, we know that you are going to find your way through this adjustment period. And so we really want to focus on relationship as the foundation upon which we build every single suggestion for supporting your child through adjustment post-brain injury. When I talk about the period of adjustment and facilitating the adaptive response in a child and really priming resilience, we want to sort of focus on this as a soft and loose three-step kind of process. The first step that I will sort of loosely define for you is that this is a time where we take care of everything for a child. We know that this child has been flooded out and overwhelmed by a change that has abruptly landed in their world, and we really want to keep life simple and focus on structures and routines and rhythm and consistency and all of the things that have us normally as human beings feeling comfortable and safe and secure in the world around us. And so that's always where we begin. And if you think about this from a neurological perspective, what we're really trying to do is take sort of the emotional reactivity that comes with having survived a situation that we didn't expect to occur, and we want to take that reactivity and just begin to sort of calm it all down. And so we will do that by commandeering the world around the child and calming that all down and really communicating to the child that we are in charge of that we understand them, that we've got this, and we're going to take care of that piece for them. As we begin to sense in our child that there is a calming happening for them, and we can see sort of that fight or flight stress response in the brain starting to sort of settle down, and you'll know that this is happening because you'll have moved from a lot of angry, loud, frustrated, mad sorts of responding into sort of softer, maybe even lots of tears and sadness kind of place. This is a time where we work to come alongside children, where we really want them to be feeling supported, where we really want them to be feeling understood and a lot of the sad that they may have presenting at this point in time. We want to continue to protect them from some of the things in life that may overwhelm them otherwise, because we want them to stay soft. We don't want them to become too overwhelmed. And we also want at this point not to be throwing everything at them, but to be paving the way a little bit. So if there are bumps in the road or other things that maybe just aren't necessary right now and that you might have a little bit control over or power over in terms of smoothing out for the child, this is a time where we'd really want for you to do that, because we want them still to be able to be soft and available to those emotions and not feel really flooded out by them. And then finally, in the third sort of loosely defined step in this process, is that we would want to find this child beginning to move forward, beginning to look at a situation and think, you know what, that's not working for me, but here's a way around. And to actually have energy that they can summon from within themselves and pull from that kind of energy to be able to exact change and difference and begin that adaptive response in their world. Now, I've outlined this loosely as a three-step sort of process, but what's important to understand is that they aren't regimented steps and that there isn't sort of a laid out map or a laid out schedule that I can provide you for how we move through. We know that there will be days where you will slide right back down to the beginning after having a bit of time of sitting maybe close to the end of step 2 or into step 3. And this is normal, it's part of life, it's just what happens for children, and we expect that to be the way that it goes. And so if that happens for your child, don't feel overwhelmed by that and don't feel too disheartened by that. It's just a normal part of the adaptive process.